I first got into Five Nights at Freddy's around January of 2022 after watching Sagan Hawks' amazing FNAF series retrospective. Now, I could make a whole video about my journey with the FNAF series, and I probably will in the future, but this was my newest obsession. I had to play some of these games. Well, at least one of them, and since I didn't have a very good PC at the time, and the majority of the series was definitely more suited to a mouse and keyboard, I really only had one option. So that March, as a late birthday gift to myself, I purchased Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach. I heard that it had a lot of glitches and other problems, but that most of them had already been patched out. So I played it on stream, and I had a great time. There were some bugs, notably with some collectibles, but nothing game-breaking. There were some questionable design choices, specifically mazer size, the Phaz Blaster and Phaz Cam making enemies really easy to deal with, and, you know, the fact that after reaching the end game you could no longer save, like at all. Now, granted, by the time I played the game, the Atrium save point had been added in, but that feels like a band-aid on a gaping wound of an issue. Like, yeah, it helps a little bit, but I still have to run all the way back here every 20 minutes. But, despite all its flaws, Security Breach is a lot of fun when you ain't got a bitch in your ear telling you it's terrible. It's got the best characters of the entire series, although none of them are especially deep, and definitely not especially scary. But they are the most fun. Freddy is a kind and earnest himbo. Roxy, who is my personal favorite, acts super confident but is really just masking her own insecurity. Sun and Moon balance being sickeningly sweet and being the embodiment of what a child thinks is hiding in their closet at night. But the best character in the game is the Pizzaplex itself. I cannot think of a location in a video game that I would like to explore more than Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex. It's like a theme park, a Chuck E. Cheese, and a mall all rolled into one. I wish I could be a kid walking around here, eating pizza, playing laser tag, playing arcade games, riding go-karts. Oh my god, this place is so cool. And yes, it's not an especially scary location, which is something that a horror game should probably have. Honestly, the only actually scary parts are the moon segment towards the beginning of the game, and anytime the endos showed up. So, does this free DLC make the game better? Does it make the latest game in this horror franchise actually scary? I know I didn't really talk about it in the intro, but does it make the story actually make some sense? Well, let's find out as we play Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach Ruin. And buckle up, because we're going full spoiler mode. So, Ruin follows a new character named Cassie, a friend of Gregory. She's been called to the Pizzaplex by Gregory after the events of Security Breach. Apparently Gregory is trapped inside underneath Roxy Raceway. This is most likely confirmation that the Burn Trap ending was the canon one. I guess it being referred to as the true ending in the game's files wasn't enough for some people. But now that we're inside the Pizzaplex, it might be a good time to mention that, holy crap, Ruin is right. This place is destroyed and falling apart. The bright and cheerful exterior that I fell in love with in the base game is completely gone. And I know that's the point, but it still makes me sad. So Cassie makes her way through the ruined Pizzaplex and finds a flashlight and a Roxy talkie, which begs the question of how she was called there in the first place. If you say it's because they're robots or something, I'm coming to your house and stealing your furniture. Cassie also finds a Phaz wrench, which allows her to do these Among Us-style puzzles and interact with some of the other computer systems in the Pizzaplex. The most important thing she finds is a Vanny mask. That's Vanny with an I. You can debate what this means in the lore amongst yourselves, but this mask allows you to access this crazy AR dimension. You also get Helpy, also with an I, who acts as a virtual assistant through the game. He also, without Cassie's consent mind you, implants her with some kind of brain chip that allows her to see him even when she doesn't have the mask on. Concerning. Anyway, the mask is the main gameplay mechanic. Cassie has to switch between the real world and the AR world, It's the kind of thing where platforms, walls, and collectibles will exist on one side but not the other. Aesthetically, the AR world kind of makes up for the lack of the vibrant colors and neon lights from the base game, but honestly, it just makes everything purple. It's fine, it just looks like the cyberspace levels from Shadow the Hedgehog. But what you'll mainly be doing is hunting down parent and child nodes. You'll find the parent node, but it's locked and needs you to find and interact with the child nodes, which are connected to the parent via glowing red wire. The child nodes take the form of objects in the environment, like plushies, boxes, chairs, etc. All this is to deactivate the security so you can get down underneath the Pizzaplex to save Gregory. Anyway, once you're done playing Prop Hunt, you can go back to the parent node, deactivate it, and move on to the next area. Oh, and how could I forget, there's a horrifying virtual ghost rabbit thing chasing you, trying to stop you. So what do you do about him? Yeah, the way to deal with the entity, as the game calls him up to this point, is to just take the mask off. He only exists in the AR world and is attracted to your overuse of the mask. And you'll know he's coming because he jump scares you to announce his presence. He can't actually kill you himself, though. But if you get too close to him for too long, or have the mask on for too long, he'll summon whatever actual animatronic is in the area to immediately kill you. So the only reason you'll die to this Luigi's Mansion reject is if you're impatient or stupid. Something that I do appreciate about Ruin, though, is that it is completely linear, which helps for the story, and also the fact that Steel Wool isn't great at programming free-roaming enemies. The first area that you make your way through is Monty Golf. It's mostly a tutorial introducing you to the types of puzzles that you'll be seeing throughout the DLC, along with the parent and child nodes and the gameplay loop revolving around them. Although he's not a huge threat, the animatronic enemy in this area is a ruined Montgomery Gator, who's still crawling around after Gregory took his legs. But now he's lost all of his plastic casing, so he just looks like a metal skeleton with a mohawk. Cool. Something else cool that you find here is an arcade cabinet that allows you to play Monty Golf. Specifically finished versions of the unfinished levels that were left in the base game. And I hate to admit it, but I think I had more fun with golf than a lot of the actual gameplay in the DLC. Cassie then makes her way into the daycare, where the daycare attendant is rapidly switching between Sun and Moon. Sun begs her to reboot them, and to do that you have to traverse the play structure, turning on generators. Again. And despite the daycare section being one of the only legitimately scary parts of the base game, I'm not sure it's even possible to die here. If you follow Sun's directions and reboot them, they become Eclipse, a balanced version of the two extreme personalities. Or at least just a chilled out version of Sun. Which brings us on to the next chapter, the Endo section. Oh, this part sucks! So in the base game, the Endo basement was one of the best parts of the game. You had to outrun from enemies who only moved when they weren't being looked at, like the famous Weeping Angels in Doctor Who. So, how do they work this time around? Well, there's a bunch of them deactivated in the room you're in. For each child node you deactivate, one of them is activated. For a grand total of 3. And if you're wearing the AR mask, they don't even run towards you. Whether you look at them or not, they just run in circles. Now, if you happen to get too close to them, they'll force the mask off of you and jump scare you. This would all be pretty lame, but not really a problem, if one of the ones that always seemed to activate wasn't in a narrow hallway that you have to go through to progress. I legitimately don't remember how I got through here. I think I just blacked out or something. This is probably my least favorite part of the game. After you deactivate the parent node, though, you get to enter the daycare theater, and even enter the secret Balloon Boy minigame room, which in the AR world looks super neat and tidy. For some reason that's probably lore-related. Do one more puzzle while avoiding the creepy rabbit, and you get to be vored by a giant Endo, and you're taken to the ride above Monty's Gator Golf. Here you get taken on a dark ride, which explains Monty's in-universe backstory. The character Monty, not the animatronic Monty. He apparently was just a simple country gator before being recruited by the glam rock band, and even seemed to look up to Bonnie before replacing him. Ironic since the animatronic Monty almost definitely killed the animatronic Bonnie. So, the Monty Golf Catwalk area is not my favorite. The layout is just really confusing. Although there's a cutscene about halfway through where Gregory just deactivates the rabbit somehow. On the bright side, that means that you don't have to deal with him for the rest of the chapter. Next, you're sent to a kitchen area where you have to deal with, who else? Chica. You actually do see her towards the beginning, but it's just a cheap jump scare. And she looks fucking disgusting. She's all covered in rotted food and, I don't know, mold maybe? This part's whatever, too. Although there is this arcade cabinet where, like the extra golf levels, you can play a finished version of Chica's Feeding Frenzy. It's not as fun as Monty Golf, but if you complete all 20 levels, you get Chica's beak back.
That's a surprise tool that can help us later.
Then there's a weird section where Helpy keeps Cassie from being able to take off the mask while you travel past a server room. That's also concerning. I hope that doesn't mean that the little shit's actually evil or something. But after that is one of my favorite parts of the game, Roxy's Salon. Apparently Roxanne is still broken up about the whole Gregory taking her eyes thing, and she still wants to hunt him down. Aside from being blind, she still seems to be much more present than Monty and Chica. I guess you could say that the others are like animals, but she is very aware. That was just a reference, by the way. I wasn't insinuating that I think Roxy is possessed by Charlie or something. God, that would be a stupid theory. Anyway, the main reason why I like this area is because it gives us a little backstory on Cassie. Presumably because of Helpy's implant from the beginning, Cassie starts seeing things in AR that are directly applied to her and her life, like pictures of herself and Gregory. You even see Roxy's missing eyes and some missing posters for Gregory. Through a little bit of dialogue and some item descriptions from earlier, we learn that Cassie's dad is/was a technician for Fazbear Entertainment, and also that Roxy is her favorite. Here we see that Cassie had a birthday party at the Pizzaplex and got a makeover with Roxy. So they have a connection that kind of parallels, I said a dirty word, the connection between Gregory and Freddy. Don't worry, this gets brought up later. But aside from getting to hang out with Roxanne Wolf, she apparently just had a shitty party, but was comforted by Gregory. But since Roxy is still trying to go after Gregory, we're actually trying to chase her right now. So Chica is the main enemy here for some reason. However, it's actually at the end of this area that Chica sits down, and if you collected her beak earlier, you can give it back to her. This doesn't actually do anything, it's just a cool thing you can do. After that, you go into a back room and see that apparently Roxy Raceway used to be a Foxy-themed log flume ride. This tracks with the theory that Roxy was previously some kind of Foxy animatronic. The back room leads us to a flooded area underground, where we get chased by Monty again. We have to turn on a neon sign, a Bonnie one, ironically, and this electrifies the water, presumably killing Monty. At least I don't think he's coming back from that one. He went out pretty dramatically. We get back up to the main raceway and run into Roxy again. Interestingly, despite being destroyed in the real world, in the AR world, her eyes, hair, and the rest of her animatronic shell is restored. Roxy is definitely the animatronic who gets the most love in the DLC, and she's my favorite in the entire series, so I'm not complaining one bit. Like Gregory's fight against her in the base game, we have to lure her into breaking down doors so we can progress. However, this time we have to use these cameras with audio lures on them. Speaking of the audio lures, the sound that they use is canonically like AI-generated versions of Cassie and Gregory's voices, which is... I mean, it's topical, I guess. And on our way out, we almost get run over by a go-kart for some reason. Roxy tries to grab us, but realizes that we're not Gregory, so she just apologizes and lets us go. It's here that Cassie finally asks Gregory what the hell happened here, to which he responds, I don't know. And after a cameo from the Paper Pals, the most important character in the franchise, we find ourselves in Bonnie Bowl. This is actually my least favorite area in the game. Forget the endos. Here you have to deal with a bunch of hordes of mini music men. There are camera stations where you have to use audio lures like the previous areas. However, this time you have to lure the groups of music men away from the child nodes. And it's in a larger area. And the music men move super slow. And if you get too close to the music men, some of them might notice you and break off from the pack to hunt you down, and it only takes one of them to kill you. And unlike the endos from earlier, putting the mask on doesn't make them lose interest. Now, I'm sure that if you're patient, it's not that bad, but I found it to be pretty frustrating. I think that once you deactivate a child mode, all the music men in the area get deactivated, but at that point, who gives a shit? You're already done. Make it through here without going insane, and you can get into Glamrock Bonnie's room. Here you can see a poster that implies that he and Freddy were in a romantic relationship. Being happy that there's a canonically gay version of Freddy Fazbear aside, this makes Freddy's comments about him in the base game a lot more sad.
There is no rabbit at the Mega Pizzaplex. Not anymore. I do not come up here anymore. I miss him.
Now I'm going to break sequence here and say that throughout the game you can find and deactivate the wet floor bots. And I haven't seen it myself in-game. I have seen the gameplay. I'm showing it on screen right now. But if you get them all, this unlocks a room about here where you can find the corpse of Glamrock Bonnie. Well, at least we know what he looks like now. Continuing on the main path, we get put in a tube and sent into Phaser Blast. Before entering, we come across a Princess Quest arcade cabinet. In AR, it even has a yellow sword sticking out of it. Yeah, put a pin in that as well as Glamrock Bonnie. This short sequence is one of the more scary parts of the game, actually. It's cramped enough, it doesn't feel too linear, it feels like something is chasing you, and if there isn't, then we should probably get out of here before it does. But we then find the corpse of Glamrock Freddy, with the word prototype suspiciously written on his foot. Like front and center in the middle of the screen, like we're supposed to see that. We don't get a chance to ask any questions because he immediately wakes up and starts chasing us. He's missing his head and his stomach hatch has been broken, so it looks like a giant mouth. Kind of like Nightmare Fredbear now that I think about it. I wonder if that was intentional. He also only exists in the real world. Once we're able to take our mask off, he just disappears. So what the hell was that? Well, remember when I said that the Burn Trap ending was like 100% the canon ending? Well, there's a good chance that I was wrong. Shocker, I know. But this Freddy being headless and in Phaser Blast is a pretty good indication that he is our Freddy and his body was left here. But then why does his foot say prototype? And it's not like we aren't meant to see it or something. It is right there, front and center, when you first see him. And then why does he completely disappear when we put our mask on? Like he doesn't exist in the AR world. But I have some thoughts on AR that we'll get to later. But the important thing to take away from here is that it looks like the Vanny saved ending is probably the canon one, because it looks like they didn't use any of Glamrock Bonnie's parts to create Burn Trap, and there's a sword in one of the Princess Quest arcade machines as though it's been defeated, which is how you get the Vanny saved ending. Anyway, we escape into a vent and get chased by a single mini Music Man for old time's sake. And I'm going to mention it now, I'm disappointed that DJ Music Man was completely absent from the DLC. He was one of my favorite parts from the base game, and he's just gone here. Which is weird, because he's absolutely humongous. Like how did we miss him? We're now in the home stretch of the game. This is just like an Easter egg, but we find a bunch of plushies of the Glamrock sitting on a table. And they all have the same injuries the real ones do. Roxy's missing her eyes, Chica her beak, etc. This, again, doesn't have any bearing on anything else in the game. I just thought it was a cool Easter egg and wanted to mention it. Gregory lets Cassie know that the last security node is Roxy herself, and that she'll have to be rebooted. We find Roxanne trapped underneath a forklift, somehow, and hear her talk about how she remembers Cassie. I don't think I can do this monologue justice, so I'm just going to play it in full.
Cassie. Welcome back, Cassie.
You remember me?
Your special day. I remember. Your special day. Do you still like carrot cake? It has been some time since I saw you last. If I remember correctly, it is on the 11th. I remember because you are number 1. Twice. Have you booked your party? I'm sure your friends will show up this time. Cassie? What are you doing?
Sorry.
I love carrot cake. Happy birthday, Cassie.
Fox, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
This, combined with the visions we saw in AR earlier, is honestly really heartbreaking. We actually can hear Cassie crying all the way down to the next area. Unlike Gregory, who we feel bad for out of principle since he's a child, Cassie is actually written well, so we actually feel bad for her. She's just trying to save her friend, and she ends up losing another one, on top of all the crap that she has to go through. As we make our way down here, Helpy lets Cassie know that she won't be able to use the mask since it's out of range. We take the elevator that Gregory and Freddy took in the burn trap ending of the base game, and go through a cave that feels like it would be more in place in something like Skyrim or a Legend of Zelda game. I'm not complaining, it just feels odd to be in a non-man-made structure in a FNAF game. We cross some water and our flashlight shorts out. We're really losing everything down here. As we make our way into the ruins of the Pizzeria Simulator location, we find a bunch of arcade tokens, which we can cash in with a certain Candy Cadet who has definitely seen better days. And yes, this is definitely supposed to be the same Candy Cadet who was in Pizzeria Simulator. Why wouldn't it be? I know he looks slightly different, but this is the same series where we're meant to believe that the withered animatronics are the same as the classic animatronics, and that Roxy in Base Security Breach is the same as Roxy here in Ruin. Minor design inconsistencies do not denote a separate character. And I should probably play his story here since I want to talk about it in a little bit.
Now I will tell you a story about a mother and her little boy who lived alone in a cabin in the dark woods. There was a monster in the woods, but the mother caught it and kept it locked in the basement. The monster always made scary noises at night, but the mother would tell the boy not to worry because it could never get out. Then she would sing the boy a lullaby to sleep. One day, the monster stopped growling and instead listened and learned the lullaby. The next day when the mother went out to find food, the monster sang the lullaby from the basement. The little boy heard the lullaby and opened the door.
I want to mention that I like that they didn't use text-to-speech for him this time, and instead actually used a real voice actor. I know he's literally supposed to be a robot, more than, you know, all of the animatronics here. But honestly, I think it works better like this. It's just nicer. Moving into the building, we can go inside the rooms that Burntrap was in during his boss fight, with his pod suspiciously closed and us unable to see inside. And we can also find a prize box in one of the rooms with a comic page inside depicting Burntrap and the Blob. You can actually find a bunch of these throughout Ruin, all redrawing scenes from the comic pages in the different endings of the base game. Except for one, the Vanny saved ending. The item descriptions, which are all from the perspective of Cassie, say that she thinks Gregory drew these. This implies that this kid got bored after the events of Security Breach and just started drawing what-if scenarios of different ways he could have escaped the Pizzaplex. For some reason. The elephant in the room here being that we can assume that in addition to the crap with Freddy from earlier, all of this means that the Vanny saved ending is the canon one. But then, that just raises more questions. Like, what about Burntrap? Is he still alive? How does Gregory know what he and the Blob look like? Does he even exist in this timeline? Is he actually another form of the Mimic? Also, apparently the Blob is here, and you can see him in a really short cameo towards the beginning of the DLC. I didn't even notice it myself when I was playing, but here you go. So, we get to a computer terminal and shut down the entity, who is actually called MXES, or Mixus. Mixus? I don't know. That's, you know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm trying to refer to. And he's actually a security system and not a manifestation of Glitch Trap like everyone thought. Oops! So we use a forklift to bust down a concrete door and save Gregory. Haha, JK, that's not him. To no one's surprise, Cassie was duped. And in reality, this is an endoskeleton with the ability to mimic things. Otherwise known as the Mimic, a recurring character in the Tales from the Pizzaplex books. Now, I personally haven't read the books because I'm not insane, so I'm definitely not the guy to go to for an explanation on who this character is. But there are a lot of people who have explained what's going on with him, so I'll let them do it. Just go anywhere on FNAF YouTube. I'm sure you've heard an explanation for who this guy is. The bottom line is that the new series villain, being this terrifying character who's been built up in the books since Security Breach came out, is actually pretty based and cool. You can definitely make the argument that important lore and story for a video game should be, in the game. And I've definitely made that argument about things in the past. You shouldn't have to do homework just to understand the story of any piece of media. But at the same time, for a series like FNAF, where the story has always required digging and finding Easter eggs and putting in codes, simply having to read a book is pretty simple. Or you could do what everyone else does and watch someone on YouTube summarize it. But if you know who this guy is, either from actually reading the books or watching someone on YouTube summarize them, this ending sequence is extremely hype. So after Cassie realizes that she's been Smeckledorfed by this goofy-ass robot, she gets rescued by our beloved Roxanne. And you know what? I've seen a lot of people online complain that this undermines having to kill off Roxanne, which, yeah, Cassie thinks that that's what's happening. But you know what? Earlier in the game, we have to reboot Sun and Moon, and they're completely fine. So, yeah, this is an emotional moment, and it's hard for Cassie to do, but, lore-wise, there's no reason for us to believe that this would kill her off. After a chase sequence where we would get directed by the real Gregory, we end up in an elevator where the Mimic can't get to us. But Gregory says that now that the Mimic is free, he can't let Cassie follow them. So he just drops the elevator with us inside, presumably to our death. Roll credits. Interestingly, after the credits, we hear Roxy say Cassie's name in a way that makes me think that Cassie survived and Roxy just found her. So, remember Candy Cadet's story? It's obviously about the events of the game. Why would you not think that it is? Cassie is the child, lured here by what sounds like a familiar voice. In reality, though, it's the monster, or the Mimic, mimicking the mother to trick the child into letting him out. I've seen other interpretations, but they all just sound like insane ramblings of people trying to force connections where there are none. Here's a message to the FNAF theory community, and just anyone who likes to theorize about media online. Look at what is actually happening on screen, and what is being directly explained and shown to you. This is a video game with a clear narrative, not a jigsaw puzzle that you have to force together. But this is a FNAF game, so there are two alternate endings. You get one for taking a different path during the final chase. Cassie walks up to a cardboard cutout of Fredbear, puts on the mask, and is greeted with this. Roll credits. In the files of the game, this is referred to as the Brazil ending, heavily implying that this is Cassie giving up and choosing to live in a fantasy because her mind can't handle the reality that she's living in. Huh. Okay, so that one's probably not canon. And you know what? Speaking of a fantasy world, I'm going to talk about this here. There's definitely something screwy going on with the AR world. I probably don't have to tell you that the whole objects disappearing and reappearing thing is not how augmented reality works. While in AR, we see Cassie get teleported around, go through wormholes, and Mixus is able to teleport animatronics to instantly kill you when you stick around in AR for too long. I don't for a second believe that this is all just sci-fi shit. There's definitely something supernatural going on here, and given the Brazil ending and the fact that at the beginning of the game, Helpy with an eye puts some kind of implant in Cassie so he can communicate with you, there's probably some kind of hallucination shenanigans going on. FNAF is no stranger to any of this, of course. Most of the early entries in the series imply more that the animatronics are possessed instead of being robots that are programmed to attack you. And the phantom animatronics from FNAF 3 are definitely hallucinations from lack of oxygen. I'm not sure what any of this means, though, so I'm comfortable saying that we just don't have enough information right now. The last ending requires you to activate some specific cameras at the terminals throughout the DLC, and you can look up a guide for yourself if you're interested, but activating each camera opens up a series of doors during the final chase with the Mimic. Also, it puts the Mimic in some kind of mascot costume. During the final chase, you can go through these doors and find some kind of scooping room, like from Sister Location. Cassie lures the Mimic in here and gets him scooped out of the mascot costume. I've seen a lot of people say that they think Homeboy gets killed here, but I'm not so sure about that. The Mimic is supposed to be able to mimic any other kind of animatronic endoskeleton, to a point where it's theorized that the endoskeletons that we see on rare screens in like FNAF 1 and 2, and hell, even Yendo and Sister Location, are the Mimic. And in Sister Location, getting scooped doesn't kill the animatronics, so why would it kill the Mimic? Maybe it subdues him long enough for Cassie to get out of there without being followed, but the credits roll before we get to see anything. So as much as I hate to say it, if we want to know which ending is canon, we'll just have to wait for the next game, which is actually Help Wanted 2, releasing later this year. But yeah, that's it. That's the game. That's Ruin. Now, is it a broken mess like the base game? No, not really. Is it the second coming of Fazbear? Also, no, not in my opinion. I mean, it's good, but what it comes down to is that its good parts are short and its bad parts take forever and are drug out. Usually because you're getting cheaply killed. The highlights are getting chased by Freddy and the Mimic, but those are over in a second. The Endos and the Music Men segments are garbage, and the Daycare segment is so short and has no threat whatsoever. You can only get jump scared by the daycare attendant if you just ignore turning on the generators. You have to actually try to get killed by him. However, Cassie is a great protagonist, and I'm legitimately excited to see what happens next for the series. I'm really excited for what's next for her and Roxanne, as well as Gregory, Freddy, and Vanessa. I don't want anyone watching to think that I didn't really like the DLC or something. I thought it was fun. I just had problems with it that I haven't really seen anybody else address online. I definitely recommend checking it out if you haven't played it yet. It's only like 4 hours long, and it's free if you already own Security Breach. Although if you're a FNAF fan, you've probably already played it or watched someone else play it. I don't really like to give number scores because people tend to misinterpret them. It's alright and I enjoyed it, but I wasn't totally wowed aside from the ending. But I mean, it's 4 hours long and it's free. Okay, so that was my thoughts on Security Breach Ruin. Tell me what you thought in the comments below. Like and subscribe to see more from me, including non-FNAF stuff. I have a Death Stranding video that's in the oven getting worked on. And follow me on Twitch. Link in the description. Most of the game footage that you're seeing is from me streaming the day Ruin came out, and I've been working my way through the FNAF series and playing a lot of fan games in about the order that they came out. I also play non-FNAF related stuff like Kingdom Hearts, and just whatever I feel like. Thank you so much for watching. It really means the world that someone stuck around for this whole thing. So please, take care of yourself, drink lots of water, And as always, have yourselves a damn good one.